Keeping yourself motivated takes work. If you don't work out your body, you get fat. If you don't work on your motivation, you become unmotivated. Welcome to the Motivational Voice Podcast, your source for inspiration and motivation to achieve your goals, empowering you one word at a time. Umar Jang is an author and a blogger, and he will get you motivated to do whatever you need to do. This is Motivational Voice Podcast, and this is Umar Jang.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Motivational Voice Podcast. This is session number 18, and today we are going to talk about how to nail your job interview. Before we get started, I wanted to just level set and confirm a couple of things. Job interviews are an opportunity for you to show that you are the right person for the job. The reason why employers have job interviews is that so that they can match up what they see on paper to the person that they have in front of them. They want to make sure that you are not some crazy person that's pretending to be someone that they're not. They want to make sure that you actually are someone that they can see themselves working with. So it's extremely important that you nail your first interview, that you give a good impression. If you get 2 interviews, the most important of the 2 interviews is the first one that you get, because first impressions are everything. Clearly, if you show up at an interview and you present a certain personality that disturbs or scares off the employer, you are not going to get the job. You could sabotage yourself out of a job just based on how you behave and what you do during that first interview. All right. So in today's episode, we are going to talk about tips and techniques of things that you can do to maximize your chances of landing the job, or at the very least, being one of the last 2 candidates standing. All right. Okay. So let's start talking about some of the things that you want to do at the interview. At this stage, let's assume that you got the job interview, you got called, and you set up an interview, and you got past the phone screening if there is one. So what do you need to do when you have to go in for the actual interview? Now, the phone screening is something that is just a way for the recruiters to weed off some of the candidates that raise some red flags. So the focus of this episode is on the actual sit-down interview, when you go in to talk to the panel of interviewer, or perhaps it's a single person at the company, so that they can actually ask you questions and get a feel for who you are. So we're going to share some tips about that. But it may be worth mentioning, just to give you some additional tips, it may be worth mentioning that during the screening interview, you want to make sure that you are well spoken on the phone. You want to make sure that you are somewhat coherent and you somewhat make sense in terms of how you respond and how you present yourself. Because on the phone, that first call, that screening call, may prevent you from getting to the actual interview. So be careful how you actually take that call and how you talk to the recruiter on the phone. What you want to do is, if you feel like you are not prepared when you get that phone call, make sure you tell them that you're going to call them back. Just ask them if it's not a good time for you and you are not prepared to answer some of the questions and it caught you completely off guard. Let's say you are somewhere, you are at a wedding, or you were distracted and your mind is not really into an interview mindset. Don't take that phone call, or take the phone call. Definitely take the phone call, but just find an excuse or tell them that you'll call them back, so you can have 5 minutes to collect yourself and make sure that you are prepared and you know how to answer the question. Generally, that phone screening interview is just a way to, again, weed out some of the candidates. So unless you say something really concerning on the phone, or you mumble or you stumble on the phone, you are likely not going to lose the opportunity to actually have the sit-down interview. But again, just a quick tip for what to think about in terms of that screening interview. Now, let's talk about the actual sit-down interview, which is the purpose of this particular podcast. one of the first things that you want to do is you want to make sure that you actually practice. Never, ever go into an interview without practicing first. Practicing makes your responses more natural, and it's a great way to control your nerves because it makes you more confident. If you know what you're going to say in advance, if you prepare for and anticipate some of the questions that they may ask you, you will feel more confident, and practicing will give you the opportunity to actually do that. Another tip that I'll give, which would be tip number 2, is to be professional. I have seen candidates try to be funny during interviews, which turns out to kind of fall flat. They make a joke, the joke doesn't work very well, and they end up actually making the situation awkward. So be careful not to try to be funny. If you are nervous during the interview, a quick tip that I would give is, when you walk into the interview, generally they will ask you to be courteous and to be nice. They will ask you if you need anything before they get started. If you are nervous, one trick you can use is you can ask for a glass of water or for a bottle of water. And you could just politely say, can I have something to drink, please? Can I have a glass of water or a bottle of water? My throat is a little dry. And that will give you time to actually collect yourself. And also, having the bottle of water in front of you during the interview is a good way to maybe think about your answers. You have to do it tactfully. So if you have a bottle of water, and I have a bottle of water in front of me right now, for those who are listening to the podcast, and I'm videotaping this particular episode, so I will post it on the Motivational Voice Podcast Facebook page, so you can see. So, but grab the bottle of water, just take a sip gently. And the time it takes, that pause to take a sip and then close the bottle of water, put the cap back on it and put it down on the table, allows you to think about what you want to say next. So that's a quick trip, and it allows you to actually calm your nerves. So that's one way of doing it. Of course, you don't have to ask for a glass of water or a bottle of water if you are not nervous. Even if you are nervous, there are other ways that you can calm your nerves. Is you can make a light joke if the situation is right. If there was a lot of traffic and you got there on time, but they may ask you something like, "Oh, did you get here okay?" You could say, "Oh yeah." You could make a joke there. You could just talk about traffic very, very briefly. This is not a time to talk too much. Okay, so again, be professional. Don't make any jokes that are inappropriate or jokes that may not work. Use what I would call the Goldilocks approach. Okay, don't be too loose. Okay, meaning you're not talking to friends, you're not talking to family, you're talking to professionals that are looking to hire you. You are trying to give your best impression possible. So be loose. Don't be too loose, because if you are too loose, then that screams boredom. Being too loose is being all work and no fun at all. So don't be too loose, because that could literally flag you to them as being boring and too strict. And who wants to be around a boring coworker or someone who just kind of focuses on work? They don't want to do anything else. So I've had coworkers like that where, in any workplace, in any place I've worked at, you always have someone like that where when your coworkers are putting together some kind of lunch out or some kind of event, they don't want to participate, they don't want to do anything, they just want to come in and do their jobs, which is fine. But then understand that you don't want to signal that during the interview if you are like that. So again, the Goldilocks approach. Don't be too loose, don't be too scripted either, or overly enthusiastic. Don't come in and sound like you are too scripted, meaning you're thinking about your responses and trying to nail the words that you practiced. You don't have to nail the words, you just have to understand the context around the question when you practice them. So don't be too scripted. And the way you can appear to be too scripted is you are trying to remember what you practiced. And don't do that. The idea of practicing is having a context and having an idea of how to respond, what you need to say to answer a question, not say exactly the words that you practiced, if that makes sense. So don't be overly enthusiastic. By that I mean don't show up in the interview and be too excited about the job. So that will show some desperation, and it would border on almost begging. So be careful how excited you are about the job. And sometimes when it's a good thing to say that you're excited about the job. It's not a good thing to keep repeating it over and over during the interview. And please hire me, or if you hire me, don't say that too much. Just we will talk about additional tips that where we will address how to actually properly show that you're excited about the job, because that's a good thing to be excited about the job, and it's a good thing to show them that you are excited about the job. So again, the another thing is be somewhere in the middle. Strike a professional yet amicable and likable attitude and demeanor. So be professional, be likable, smile when appropriate, and certainly smile and laugh if the situation calls for it. So know when to be professional and strict, know when to smile and laugh, because I've been in interviews on either side of the table as the interviewer and as the interviewee, where the situation did call for people to smile and laugh, for a fraction of a second, or for a few seconds, or 20 seconds or so. Anyway, now the other piece is you absolutely need to make sure that you don't talk negatively about any of your past coworkers, or certainly don't backbite, don't talk bad about anyone when you're doing the interview, because that reflects negatively on who you are. Because remember, they may be your future coworkers. If you are talking badly about your past coworkers or your current coworkers, they may be thinking, well, if this guy is interviewing for another job, this is how he's going to talk about us to those employers. So be careful not to make it about other people, or not to come across as being negative and talking badly or bad-mouthing others. The other tip is do your homework. So that's tip number 3, which is do your homework. Be prepared to answer the standard questions that are generally asked in interviews. Things like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Or where do you see yourself in 10 years? Or tell us about a time when your manager made a decision that you disagreed with, and what did you do? So those are standard questions that come up, and these are psychological questions that test your ability to deal with conflict and your ability to be candid and honest when a situation arises. And what they are looking for when they ask you a question like that is that they are looking to see if, when confronted by your supervisor or by a leader in the company, you will be willing to voice your opinion that the decision they're making is a negative decision, or perhaps not a negative decision, but a decision that you don't agree with. However, you can tell them what the reason why you don't agree, and tell them that you do support their decision to move forward, as long as you made your voice, you made your objection, if you will, be heard by them. So manager comes with a decision, you don't agree, you tell them why you don't agree, and always tie the why to the betterment of the company, to the betterment of the project, of what you're working on. I don't agree because if we take that approach, it's going to take us 3 months to actually implement that project. I don't agree because if we take that approach, it is going to be very, very difficult for us to reach our goal. I don't agree because you get the idea. I don't agree because there is a better way to do it. But if the decision is made to move forward with the solution that you don't agree with, go with it. Be a team player. So don't be don't be the negative person that's going to oppose everything the supervisor said or a coworker says because they chose a different path to what you suggested. That's what that question is aiming to unearth, if you will, to see if you are a team player and if you are a person who voices their opinion to make sure that the best solution is chosen during a project. So that's what that question is looking to unearth. So make sure you practice those questions. And of course, make sure you research. Be prepared to answer. Be prepared to answer a question like, what do you know about our company? So do your homework to make sure that you know when the company is founded, what the company does, the basics, how many employees they have maybe, or perhaps if they are in more than one location, what locations roughly. You don't have to memorize everything, but have some idea of what this company is, what they do, and how they operate at a high level. Because they don't expect you to know everything about the company, but they expect you to have done your homework so that you can actually answer some basic questions about the company. And it shows that you are taking the initiative to research them, to understand better what they do, so that when you come in the interview, they don't have to waste time explaining every single thing that they do. And the other point, this is point number 4, tip number 4, be concise and get to the point. This is extremely important. Answer questions under 2 to 3 minutes and get to the point. If you are answering a question, don't circle about the question. Don't go the long way. Be concise, be direct, give enough detail but not too much detail. Answer the question. Don't add stories that are irrelevant to the question. Make sure that every answer you give is very limited, very succinct, and very straightforward. This is an interview. They can ask you additional questions if they have to, or if they need clarification on a question. And actually, the power in answering questions very succinctly is that it drives their curiosity to learn more or to want to know more, so that they can ask you follow-up questions on the answers that you gave. But again, don't hold back. Make sure you give a clear, complete answer, but be simple, be straightforward. So take off all the lean and the fat of your answer. Just keep the answer very lean and trim off all the side stories, and don't go into side branches as you answer the question. So that's extremely important to keep in mind, because generally during an interview, whether it's a half an hour interview, an hour interview, they have a specific set of questions they want to ask you. And if it's a panel, each of them takes a question or 2 or 3, or they take turns. If your answers are too long, they won't have enough time to get to all their questions. And what happens is, towards the end of the interview, they will start rushing. And that's never a good way for you to be able to show who you are. And the atmosphere, the way they feel if the interview is rushed towards the end, that feeling of stress or that feeling of rush will impact unconsciously their decision or their perception of you. So be careful there. So again, it's super important to be concise and to be very, very straightforward. The worst thing you can do is to be perceived as someone who is too talkative. That's a dangerous label that could cost you the interview. And if you answer questions and you take too long, they are going to say, well, this guy doesn't, well, 2 things. They're going to say that you talk too much. The other thing is that they may say that you can't simplify a complex idea into a simple process and a simple answer. So that's why being concise during your interview is important. Another thing is, watch your body language. Show that you are engaged in and interested in the interview, and your posture, how you sit in that chair, whether you are kind of slouching or whether you are sitting straight with a straight posture, a smile, your jaw line kind of straight up. That says something about how how you feel on the inside in terms of excitement. Someone who's excited, they're on their almost on their toes. They're sitting up. They're standing up and sitting up. Not to say to stand up in the interview, but in general, if someone is excited, they tend to be kind of jumping around and showing excitement. In the interview, when you're sitting down, keeping that posture, your body posture straight and looking up, making sure that you are always making eye contact with the interviewers, the person asking the questions. That actually helps show how engaged you are in listening to what they have to say, but also how enthusiastic and excited you are about the job. And of course, make sure you smile. Smiling changes everything. And they say smiling is cheap, and when you frown, scientifically it takes a ton of muscles to frown. It only takes a handful of muscles to smile, and it doesn't cost you anything. You can't help but stay relaxed and positive, which boosts your confidence and makes you more articulate in your responses. And it also kills stress and nervousness. When you have a smile on your face, you can't help but just be happy. These are techniques of public speaking that I use. And when you have that mindset of smiling, it just does something to your brain that everything is going to be okay. And you find your confidence. And when you find your confidence, you are more eloquent, and you are more likable in a way. And smiling is contagious. When you smile, they can't help but also kind of put a grin on their faces. Of course, don't force the smile. It has to be natural, and don't overdo it as well. Don't smile the entire interview. Be serious when need be. So tie your mood to the seriousness of the question, but stay positive. They are looking for the full package during the interview and comparing you to all the other candidates that came before you and all the candidates that will come after you. Every area that you nail gets you closer to being the perfect candidate in the recruiter's minds, in the interviewer's minds. The interview is not just one. The interview is not just one thing. It's a combination of a plethora of categories that you are being judged on. And some of the points that I touch here are some of those categories. And you have to make sure that you nail each and every one of those points that I talked about to maximize your chances of landing the job. So another point would be asking questions, but not just asking questions, because what I've seen in interviews is people ask questions because they were told you have to ask questions, because otherwise that negatively reflects on your level of interest in the job. That's not true. If you don't have any questions to ask, don't ask any questions. It's perfectly fine to say, I've researched the company very well. At this time, I don't have any questions. It's completely fine to say that. If you do have questions, of course, ask them. If you're certainly not sure about what you'll be doing in the job, you can certainly ask that. And it's actually a good idea to ask questions. But specifically, these questions that I'm going to give you, some of them are things like, what do you feel the person who previously had this position did well? That is, of course, if you're replacing someone at that job. Now, knowing what questions to ask is super important. After I've been offered jobs, I have been told that some of the reasons why they offered me the job was because I asked questions that no one else asked. Very poignant questions that were relevant for the interview that no one else thought to ask. And the question I just gave you, what do you feel the person who previously had this position did well, is one of those questions. Another question is, what do you feel they could have done differently to help you with your overall goals? So that's a very important question. Another question is, are there certain certifications or ongoing education that I should be thinking about to bring this position up to a higher standard? So these are just a handful of questions that you can ask. These questions work well because it tells the employer that you want to bring the best of yourself to the job. You want to grow with the company. In translation, I am going to quit. I'm not going to quit anytime soon because I am really going to be invested in this job. That's why I'm asking you about what I can do to personally and professionally develop in this position, what I can do to work towards the goals of the company. So this shows engagement. It shows that you are in this for the long haul. Even if you're not, even if you end up staying with the company for 3 years or 5 years or less than that, it shows that you are really interested in the position. So there are other ways that you can show your interest and your enthusiasm in the position. These questions do all those things at the same time. Now, again, don't ask questions just for asking. I have been in interviews where people ask some genuinely silly questions, and it just, you could tell, and you couldn't tell that they were asking the question because, again, they were told to ask the question. So and certainly things that you don't want to bring up in the interview this is another point, is don't bring up money. You will have plenty of time to ask about money. So if you bring up money, it's a huge red flag in interviews. So unless you are in some industry where that's okay to do, which I can't think of any, don't do that. So when you ask about money, if you bring up money, which does happen sometimes, or if they bring up money, which does happen sometimes, I've been asked in interviews by the employer, what were you expecting in terms of salary? And that actually may come up in most interviews. That's not unusual. Then, and this is important, if you go back to the previous podcast episode that I did about how to do a job search in terms of job search strategies, I talk about how you can research the job and figure out what salary range the job you applied for is going to be. So, and that's super important. So go back to episode, I believe it's episode 17 on job search strategies, and listen to what I said there in the interview to help you figure out what the salary range would be. And of course, there's a good chance that you may know, because if you have 10 years of experience in your field or 15 years of experience in your field, you know that with that much experience, you generally get paid between, this is a random number, between $90,000 to $150,000 or $200,000, depending on your job, or it could be less, again, depending on your job. But then you have a good idea of how much you should be paid. So if they ask you, if you can, going back to the money issue, if they ask you what you're looking for in terms of salary range, give them a range and be careful. Make sure you research this well. Again, go back to episode 17 and listen to that. Be careful what you say and make sure that you're not overshooting, asking too much. Make sure you're not asking too little either, because this is although you're not negotiating about money quite yet, that will happen when they offer you the job. This will set their baseline for how much they will offer you, or they can negotiate with you. So do not answer the question. Be honest and tell them, I'm looking for within this range. Okay? Generally, they will tell you right there that whether that's way too much or whether it's within the range that they're looking at. The answers that I've gotten personally in the past have been, yeah, that's definitely within the range of what we're looking for. Yeah, that shouldn't be an issue. So that meant that I was in the right ballpark. Right. So when you do all these things, when you think about all these points that I talked about, employers will remember you. And most importantly, you are going to be on their top candidates list, which is what you're looking for. Out of all the candidate pool, out of all the candidates within the pool of candidates, you want to make sure that you are in the top 5 or top 3 candidates. Those are the candidates that get a first interview. So if you apply all these strategies and do them just like I said, and there are more things out there that you can do, of course, things like making sure that you dress appropriately. So your hair is well done or well cut. If you are a man, you dress in a nice shirt, at the very least a nice dress shirt, dress pants, dress shoes. If you could wear a suit, perfect. And of course, again, depending on the job, there may be a job where it's with a startup and they are wearing t-shirts. And even then, you want to dress at the very least, business casual. So that's a nice shirt, nice pants. If you are a woman, that's a nice dress. Hair well done. Perhaps some very nice earrings that are not noticeable. Just keep it simple. You don't want to draw attention to things that are not important. You want to draw attention on you, the whole package, in terms of your skills, your knowledge, your brains, not what you're wearing, but dress appropriately. So for men, it never fails to get a nice haircut the day before, come in fresh, wear a nice shirt, and again, suit if you can. But that really helps, because that, again, they're judging you on they're trying to match up who you are, so the person, with what's on paper, your resume. So you want to walk out of the interview and be seen as, oh, the nice guy, the guy with the good questions, the guy who gave the great examples, the guy who was nicely dressed, the guy who was smiling and making eye contact. And one final tip I'll give you, this is, very few people do this, and I guess after the podcast airs, a lot of people will be doing it. I learned this from public speaking, and actually you could say even writing speeches or writing stories. When you write a story, you have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So most people do the beginning well. So they come in, they shake hands very well, and they present themselves. They do the middle well, which is answering the questions and giving examples based on the questions that they were asked. But they don't do the end very well. So you came in, you nailed the intro, you nailed the middle in the interview. Why don't you close the deal? Why don't you close it up? Now I know you want to know how to close it up, right? Here's how. You want a conclusion to the interview, to kind of tie the whole thing in a nice bow, gift wrap it, if you will. You give a very short, brief summary of your interest in the job, and you give a very short 2-sentence speech as to why you are the best candidate. So an example of that is, and I've done this in the past 2 or 3 interviews that I've had, and so this spans I want to say 6 years or so. I've done that basically in the past 6 years. In the past 6 years, I've had 2 positions. So anyway, so I've done this, and what it is you give you say something like, so the interview is over, and then they will ask you, is there anything else you want to say before we make a hiring decision, or something like that. So what you say at that point is you say, thank you very much for having me. I am really interested in the job. And I want to say one final thing. I know that I won't be the first. I know that I am not the first candidate to be interviewed, and I will not be the last candidate that you will interview. And I'm sure there are many more candidates that are just as skilled and as qualified as me. However, when I'm hired, I will be someone that you can trust, someone who has the experience, someone who is very trustworthy. If you ask any of my previous employers or coworkers, they will tell you that I am someone who is trustworthy, respectful, professional, someone who always helps others professionally and personally, someone who actually will bring something new, something different to the job. Thank you very much for having me. So this was just an example of what you can say. So whatever that conclusion is, you need to wrap it up and show another dimension beyond the paper, which is the resume, beyond the person, which is you. Just tie it up. That's something very different that most people don't do. So I hope that these tips have been helpful. So that's the last tip I wanted to share with you. I hope you the best on your next interview. And if you have any questions about this, if you are perhaps in a job market where things are done slightly differently, or you just have additional questions or a specific situation that's specific to you, feel free to ask me a question. You can go to my website, omardieng.com. On the left-hand side, you will see where it says leave me a voicemail. If you click on that, you can ask me a question and I'll get the notification right away and I'll answer your question either via email or I'll mention it on the air. So anyway, thank you very much for listening to the podcast. And again, don't forget to share the podcast. Go on iTunes and leave a review, an honest review and your thoughts. I like to see those. And of course, I have a Facebook group for the podcast. And I forgot to mention this previously. I have a group, and it's a career and life coaching group that you can join for free. If you go on Facebook, just type in the search bar career and life coaching, and my name will pop up. Ask to join the group, and I'll let you join the group. I'll authorize you right away. Thank you very much for listening to the podcast. I wish you the best in your job endeavors, in your job hunting, in your job interview strategies. Thank you very much for listening. And as always, please stay safe and motivated. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to the Motivational Voice Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and rate it on iTunes. Get show notes and the latest blog posts at omardieng.com.